There is a moment in the new Black Myth Zhong Kui trailer that took me a couple of watches to understand. The swordsman is fighting the giant clam, something pale pulls away from his body, the skill icons change, and suddenly, we're controlling someone else. Not just a new attack animation, a completely different figure. A hooded figure with gold armor on one arm and a curved blade in his hand. For about 24 seconds, that figure becomes the playable character, then he disappears and the swordsman is back. The interesting question isn't just what that ability does. It's why the character he becomes was already there. Because once you notice that, this stops looking like a normal transformation. It starts looking like a much older story about how Zhong Kui works and what happens to the ghosts who end up working for him. Let's rewind. At 10 minutes and 38 seconds, something drops into the fight. It lands hard enough to kick up dust, dark cloak, armored arm, curved weapon. And then it just stays there. For more than a minute, this thing fights beside the player. It doesn't attack him. It isn't treated like another boss, it's helping. Then around 12 minutes into the trailer, the player activates something. A pale shape separates from the swordsman, the skill bar changes, and now we're moving as that hooded fighter instead. So, at the very least, the trailer shows two linked ideas: summon an ally, then take control of it. Is that possession, a spirit transfer, some other kind of transformation? Game science hasn't named the mechanic, so we can't know yet, but possession is a reasonable way to describe what it looks like. And if you know a little about Zhong Kui, that possibility makes a lot of sense. In Chinese folklore, he isn't simply a man who kills every ghost he meets. He's a ghost catcher, an enforcer, and in plenty of stories, someone with authority over the beings he's dealing with. Some ghosts run from him, some fight him, and some end up on the payroll. One of my favorite examples comes from Zhong Kui Pingguizhuan, a Qing dynasty novel about Zhong Kui putting down troublesome ghosts. Near the beginning, Zhong Kui meets the ruler of the underworld and is given an assignment. What follows doesn't read like a mysterious prophecy, it reads like somebody getting set up for a new government job. He receives a register, a sword, a horse, an official's cap, a robe, a court tablet, and a belt. And then the book adds one more detail. 4 ghost attendants are assigned to him. Not 4 ghosts he has to defeat, 4 ghosts who are supposed to help. The novel even names them big head, bold, meticulous, and clever. One walks ahead to clear the road, one carries the luggage, and the book is specific about what's in it: a zither, a sword, and a book chest. That's the traveling kit of a man going to sit the imperial examination, which is exactly what Zhong Kui was before he died. One carries a red silk lantern, and the last one holds a canopy over him. Yellow silk, 3 tiers of fringe, the kind of thing that tells everyone on the road what rank is going past. So it reads less like a monster squad and more like a procession. Which changes the way that hooded figure looks in the trailer. A ghost standing beside the protagonist isn't automatically there as an enemy. In a Zhong Kui story, a ghost can also be staff. That doesn't prove the game is adapting this exact novel, or that the hooded fighter is one of those 4 specific attendants. It just means the idea already fits the world this game is drawing from. And once you understand that, the next question gets even more interesting. If one of these spirits can fight for you, can you also step inside it? There's an older Zhong Kui story that doesn't answer that question directly, but gets surprisingly close. In the Ming Dynasty complete tale of Zhong Kui, a man lodging in the same building as Zhong Kui spends a night with a courtesan and comes home ill. His face goes gray, he stops eating, he takes to his bed, and the doctors get nowhere. Then Zhong Kui has a dream, and someone in the dream tells him the man has been taken by a spirit and that he should deal with it before it costs him his life. The courtesan is a soft-shell turtle wearing a woman's shape. So Zhong Kui writes a formal appeal to heaven and burns it. Then he waits. 1 day passes, then another. Eventually 5 days go by with no obvious answer. And suddenly he collapses. The book says his breathing stops. His friends think he's dead. Except for one strange detail. His chest is still warm. Only the area around his heart still holds warmth. A little later, he wakes up and tells everyone that he was summoned away to kill the spirit. Naturally, nobody believes him. So Zhong Kui picks up his sword. There's still fresh blood on it. That's the part I love. His body never appeared to leave the room, but whatever went out in his place came back having done something real. Now the novel doesn't describe him entering the body of a ghost companion. The trailer doesn't explain exactly what the pale figure is either. They're not identical scenes. But they share a very recognizable idea. The person you see standing in front of you isn't necessarily the only place that person can act from. And suddenly that 24-second switch feels a little less like a random video game power, and a little more like the game finding a playable shape for an old supernatural idea. Now look at the figure we take control of. He's hooded, one arm is armored, and he's carrying a curved single-edged blade. I've seen a lot of discussion trying to identify exactly which historical sword style inspired the combat. That can be interesting, but here there's a simpler question. Why does a summoned spirit show up looking like this in the first place? One possible clue comes from Qingwei Yuanjiang Dafa, a collection of Taoist ritual material. In a section describing summoned divine officers and attendants, the text gives them a very specific visual description. Golden armor with a goose quill saber in hand. A goose quill saber is a traditional curved Chinese blade named for its shape. And just after the descriptions of these armed figures, the same section includes a talisman for summoning a general. So we have a ritual tradition describing summoned martial figures, gold armor, curved blades, and the talismans used to call them. Then we have a trailer where a hooded ally appears through supernatural means, fights beside the player, and carries a curved blade with gold armor on his arm. That isn't proof that game science copied this specific text. Gold armor and curved weapons appear in a lot of Chinese imagery. But it gives the design a context that makes more sense than treating the weapon as a disconnected historical sword trivia question. The blade may be telling us less about the swordsman's personal fighting style and more about the kind of being he has called into the fight. There's another small detail that points in the same direction. A Bilibili creator named Swoma noticed that several of the skill icons resemble elements found in Taoist talismans, including firewheel imagery, talisman headers, and cloud script forms. Those comparisons aren't official confirmation of what each skill does, but they do suggest that the game's visual language is being built around ritual symbols, not just generic fantasy magic. And that makes the companion feel less like a random summon and more like somebody called in through a system with its own rules. Now, whenever people start talking about Zhong Kui and ghost companions, the phrase 5 ghosts usually shows up pretty quickly. But here's where it gets fun. The 5 ghosts aren't always loyal assistants. In one famous tradition, they're the reason Zhong Kui has a very bad afternoon. The Qing dynasty novel Zhong Kui tells a story about 5 little ghosts who find Zhong Kui sitting under a tree. They approach him politely, they offer him wine, they sing, dance, and keep refilling his cup until the great demon queller is completely drunk. Then one of them suggests he take off his boots and cool down. 2 ghosts pull off the boots. Another steals his sword. Another takes his official court tablet. And the last one climbs a tree, hangs down from a branch, and hooks the cap right off his head. By the end of the scene, Zhong Kui is barefoot, half undressed, and missing most of the equipment that tells everyone he's supposed to be in charge. That's the old story often called 5 ghosts tease Zhong Kui. And if the stolen objects sound familiar, there's a reason. The sword, the official tablet, the cap. They're the same kinds of items another Zhong Kui novel lists when he receives his underworld appointment. It's a great joke. The terrifying supernatural official gets robbed of the very things that make him look official. So there are really 2 different ideas living side by side in these stories. Sometimes ghosts are Zhong Kui's assigned helpers, sometimes they're troublesome little thieves who make him look ridiculous. The game could borrow from either tradition or both. What we can say is that the trailer confirms exactly 5 summonable companions. The number belongs to a storytelling tradition, it isn't a confirmed gameplay feature. But the bigger idea, that ghosts can be enemies, helpers, or something inconveniently in between, belongs at the center of Zhong Kui's world. Which brings us to the last image in the trailer. A dark cloaked rider, a sword on his back, and a tiger underneath him. My first thought was probably the same as yours. That's the swordsman we've been following, just in a different outfit. The scabbard looks green in both scenes, so it feels like an easy connection. But look more closely at the swords. The swordsman's fittings look rough and weathered, the riders are brighter and more decorative, and the grip doesn't appear to match. That doesn't mean they're definitely different characters. A person can change weapons. But it does mean a green scabbard isn't enough to identify the rider. And the tiger isn't quite as straightforward as it looks either. Zhong Kui and tigers do appear together in historical art. There's even a work in the Smithsonian's collection called Zhong Kui on a tiger. So the image isn't coming out of nowhere. But when you open the old novels, the story gets more complicated. In Zhong Kui there's a scene where Zhong Kui and a demon face each other on a battlefield. Zhong Kui is riding a base. The demon is riding the tiger. In Tang Zhong Kui, Ping Gui Zhuan, Zhong Kui receives a horse instead. Another ghost rides an owl, one of the villains rides a tiger, and another, somehow, rides a giant maggot. So there isn't one fixed universal answer to what animal Zhong Kui rides. Different stories and paintings give different answers. But the base is the one I can't stop thinking about. In Zhong Kui Zhuan, Zhong Kui is getting ready to leave the underworld and begin his work when he realizes he has a problem. He has assistants, he has a sword, but he doesn't have a ride. And apparently walking isn't appropriate for someone with his new rank. So the ruler of the underworld says he knows just the creature. A base living in the mountains. A base is a supernatural creature from Chinese tradition, often associated with knowledge of strange beings. But this isn't simply a magical animal that happens to be available. In the story, the creature used to be a man named Bo Pia, a corrupt official who helped bring down the loyal minister Wu Zixu. As punishment, Bo Pia was transformed into a beast. Now he has a chance to work off what he did. His job is to carry Zhong Kui, while Zhong Kui goes out into the world and deals with injustice. And if he serves well enough, he may eventually earn his way back. Think about that for a second. Zhong Kui is a man who, in many versions of the legend, was failed by the human world and then found his purpose after death. The creature carrying him is another former official, one who failed somebody else and now has to serve the cause he once betrayed. One story turns a monster into an employee. Another turns a disgraced man into a mount. Neither of them is just there to look frightening. They have a place in a world where death doesn't erase responsibility and punishment doesn't always rule out redemption. That's a much stranger and much richer idea than simply asking whether the tiger means this game is open world. For the record, it might have larger areas, it might have rideable mounts, or that tiger could appear only in a cinematic. The trailer doesn't tell us enough to decide. What it does give us is something more useful, a glimpse of a world where the beings around the hero aren't just monsters to kill. Some can be commanded. Some can be borrowed. Some will steal your boots if you drink too much. And some may be carrying centuries of guilt on their backs. That's what stayed with me after watching this trailer. Not just that the swordsman can summon a fighter, or that the skill icons change when he takes control. It's the possibility that all these details belong to the same idea. In a Zhong Kui story, ghosts aren't simply the things you hunt. Sometimes they're the people you're responsible for. And sometimes the most interesting question isn't who deserves to be destroyed. It's who still gets a chance to become something else. Next time I want to look at the creatures scattered across the rest of the trailer, what some of them resemble in Chinese folklore, which connections actually hold up, and which ones are still just guesses. Because once you start looking closely, this world gets stranger very quickly.